moving right along in lieu with the fact that Halloween is coming up, I thought I would take a particular time on the Sterkel sessions to talk about some horror films. Why? Because I'm in the process of selling one, and two, one, B, D. Sorry, that's a Home Alone joke, and so that's more of a Christmas joke. But hey, we're at Halloween right now, so keep those Christmas jokes at bay. All right, everybody's super ready for Christmas, I'm sure. Anyway, but I want to talk about some Halloween films, some horror films that were good, that are definitely worth watching. I've done, I think, 3 now, and this will be the 4th. This may be one of the last ones. I may recommend one more before Halloween time is over, but it's just because I do like horror film. And this one is the original. Well, I'm sorry, this is not actually the original. Excuse me. This is the remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Okay, why is this film good? Oh my gosh, it has a PG rating. They definitely had a different view of what was PG back then. I will say that. Ratings are the oddest thing to me. What did I see the other day? Oh, There Will Be Blood was rated R. There's nothing in it that would be considered to be rated R. There's not really any. There's some language, but there's not really any harsh language, and there's barely any violence. Yet they gave it a rated R rating. Yet something like this in the 70s, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, gets a PG rating, that's fascinating to me, and that's a topic for another time. So we'll not delve into that too deeply, but because I don't think, like, I saw a documentary that like it's some kind of conspiracy or something, and I doubt it is. It's just a product of the time. Like, whatever they consider to be harsh for that time is what they're going to give a stronger rating for, because that's who's going to see it. It's not 20 years audience 20 years ago, when they use racism and language and all that kind of stuff, and rape on a regular basis and things like that. Like, that was completely different visually than it is now. We just view it completely differently. And I'm not saying any of it is right. None of it is. What I'm saying is that it was just rated differently back then. Man, time changes fast, and it's a good thing too. I'm going to be honest with you. Considering since in the 50s, in certain parts of the South, blacks couldn't even use the same water faucet, or not faucet, water, what is that? Water, no, it is, no, water, I don't know, you know what I mean? What do you drink? Water fountain. And now they can? Yeah, I'd say we made some progress, which is a good thing. But anyway, wow, I'm really getting into some sociological topics here. But regardless, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This is a masterwork of horror film. Anyone who is serious about the horror genre should have seen this film by now. It was made in 1978. It was made off an original idea that was many, many years before that, in the 50s. But this is kind of the premiere one of it. It is fascinating. It is chilling. And it has one of the best endings of all time. And I will leave it at that. It's got Leonard Nimoy, Donald Sutherland, Jeff Goldblum. I don't know what it is about Jeff Goldblum, but he seems to always show up at the right time for movies. I don't know what that is, because it's like, he's made some films by himself, like The Fly and stuff, which were okay. But whenever there's an ensemble cast, and it's a good damn film, Jeff Goldblum seems to be there. It was kind of like in the 70s, the same with Robert, who's the guy in Godfather and Network? Robert, I can't remember now. But anyway, I can look it up real quick, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to waste my time. Anyway, he seemed to be all in all the great 70s films, but Goldblum just seems to be in all the great films. Like, he's in Jurassic Park. He was in the third Thor, which was arguably, definitely the best of the Thors. But it was also a push towards the major movement of Marvel, which is when they became their most popular, which is now. I don't think it'll last, because nothing like that can last forever, and it's not because they're not good storytellers. They certainly are. My personal opinion on the Marvel series is the best stories are going to be told over the next 10 years. It's just that people are going to be like, yeah, but where's Iron Man? It's like, dude, guy's dead. He's just, and then he was gone. But he saved the galaxy. So we should all be thankful that Iron Man was there. I hope I didn't ruin anybody. But seriously, if you've not seen Endgames by now, you kind of deserve to have it ruined, to be honest with you. Like, if you were hanging on that and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I didn't want to know. It's like, dude, it's too bad, man. It's been out for, what, 4 months now. And it's out on DVD now. Or whatever, Voodoo or Hoodoo or all kind of weird shit. So just accept the fact that you should have had it ruined if you've not done it by now. Um, the pacing in this is really good. Even by today's standards, it keeps up with the pacing of today's standards, which sometimes in some horror films, especially the old monster classics, you can lose a little bit of pacing. It can get a little boring. But the pacing is still there. And the reason I mention pacing is because, in particular, pacing is a big issue to a lot of audiences. People, for whatever reason, have never really liked slow-paced films. And they were exceptionally slow way back when, but they've moved steadily faster as time has gone on. You almost can't make a film anymore without it having a decent amount of pacing in it. Tell that to the guy that made Tree of Life, Terrence Malick. And he's like, "Hey, I can give them a silent film pacing, and they won't care." No, they did. But regardless of my feelings towards Terrence Malick and the Tree of Life, let us move on. Definitely see this film, especially around Halloween time. It's super scary. It is still scary by today's standards. I would argue it is. I'm not going to give you a lot of the plot in it because I don't want to spoil it. Because you'll just have to watch it and understand what goes on. And it's fascinating and it's great. It's a great film. And it's super scary, as I said before. I can't even think of a film that really that's like semi like this. Because like Night of the Living Dead is about zombies. This is about something completely different. So it's about aliens, basically, I guess, so to speak. I'm not going to give away too much of it, but it's just a good, solid film. I remember watching this when I was a kid because my parents were very liberal and letting me watch a lot of different cinema, which they don't realize that even though at the time, like everybody was like, hey, maybe you should not let them watch that stuff. They don't realize how much that helped me out in being able to critically analyze film. And if I ever have kids, I will do the same for them. Because I feel like art is one of those rare things where it needs to be exposed to children. And there are some forms of art that are definitely not. But by and large, the things that society produces should be analyzed and criticized by an adult. But the child should be able to watch it first. Like, let me give you an example. My dad showed me Predator when I was 6 years old. All right. And it's a rated R film. Now, yeah, he muted some of the language and stuff like that, but the violence and all that stuff was not. And, and some people would be like, well, that's way too young to show a kid. Well, probably. But at the same time, what it allowed me to do is now I can make my choices on what kind of cinema I like. Okay? If I hadn't liked it, I probably would have said, okay, that's probably it for me, and blah, blah, blah. Or it's too scary. I've been like, in 6-year-old Jeremiah, it's too scary, which is a spot on impression of 6-year-old Jeremiah. But I just feel like that shouldn't, if you make, and that now I'm getting back into my quote unquote parenting theory, which is if you make something illegal or a taboo for a child, all you're encouraging them to do is when they get away from you is to find out what that is. That's it. Drugs, sex, whatever, film, art, whatever. If you make any of that stuff taboo, then it will come back to bite you because when they get away from you, all they're going to want to do is figure out what they've missed for that entire time. Now, it could be that they don't like it, and that's great. But it could be that they do, and then all of a sudden now you're the bad guy because you didn't give them any critical analysis to it at all. Okay? And now they're like, well, if they lied about that, what else did they lie about? And then, it kind of descends from there. Because I always heard people say you shouldn't tell kids that Santa Claus is real because when they get older, they'll be like, hey, if you lied about that, then you can lie about other stuff. No, Santa Claus is completely different. These are made up things like Easter Bunny and blah, blah, blah. Okay? So who cares about that? That's a very small thing in the grand scope of things. But keeping things like there are parents that won't show kids films with sorcery and stuff like that because they think it's demonic and all this kind of blah, blah, blah. All you're doing is you're making a certain canon of film, like The Wizard of Oz, like, I don't know, there's thousands of sorcery films. I don't even know where to begin. Half of the 1950s to 1980s Disney canon had sorcery in it. So, I mean, showing them Chitty Chitty Bang Bang only goes so far, or whatever it is that you can show them that doesn't have a magical element. Because I think even I thought that car was magical. That I don't know. I did watch the one with Lindsay Lohan, and that was a good one. Anyway, what I'm getting back to is why not you be the one that shows them that than having their idiot friends show them that, right? Because their idiot friends are going to agree with them whatever they say. Hey man, my parents are jerks for not letting me watch this, dude. It ain't that bad. And they'll be like, yeah man, because you also ride in cars with us and talk about stuff, I mean, that's basically it. Whereas if a parent's like, hey, I'm going to show this to you, then you kind of defrag it for them after that. I think that's a good thing. And I think horror in particular is something that children should be exposed to at a younger age. And again, it depends on what type of horror it is. Because like slasher films don't have as much artistic appeal. Does that make sense? Like Friday the 13th itself, the first one, it's a pretty decent standard horror film. Young people doing taboo stuff, they get killed, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of elements that go into that. It's a classic kind of horror story, right? And you can talk to them about that, okay? But the thing is that, Friday the 13th Part 7, not going to be as critically analyzed as the original Friday the 13th. Jason Takes Manhattan, not a masterpiece, okay? It's good for a laugh and sitting down eating popcorn and stuff, but as far as it being analyzed, critique, or the Leprechaun series, okay? Leprechaun 1, 2, 3, Leprechaun 4 in space, I think there is actually one in space, which is really, really good. Because if you're going to take it anywhere, take it in space. But again, if you make these things like any form of art illegal, because like the reason that art is important to children is this simple reason, okay? And this is going to be the most important thing I'm going to say on this this video, so listen up. Children interpret reality through art, okay? Now, most people, by the time they're about 25, they've given up on really growing leaps and bounds. They just have, okay? But before that, they're trying to get shortcuts to figure out how they can interpret life very quickly. Because by the time they're 18, they're out of the house usually, or going to school, or doing something that's going to involve something real. So they want to get as much information as they can before that time. That's why art appeals to younger people, and typically the older you get, the less it appeals to you. Because you've seen all of that, and you understand the nuance and the difference between art to reality and blah, blah, blah. Now, young people don't. So they're trying to figure out how they can interpret reality as quickly as possible, and art is a really good way. Because telling a story is a far easier way to giving a lesson about life than it is to actually read it in a textbook or see your parents do it or blah, blah, blah. It's far easier. So that's typically what we choose in order to find stories and that kind of stuff. So that's why you shouldn't make those types of things taboo. Okay? Now, drugs and sex, that's a whole different topic, and I'm definitely not going to get into that because that's not what this podcast or this video is about. But what I'm saying is, even though this is clearly not a PG movie, okay? This is clearly not. And in most of the Sterkel sessions, I do recommend that you don't watch them with children. This one is fine at about age 10, depending on the artistic maturity of the child, because it varies because some children are not interested in art and some are, okay? So if you have a child that likes decent films like Harry Potter or something like that, then you can show this to them. The only preface is if they like Harry Potter, then this would be fine. Okay. Now, obviously, if they get nightmares and stuff, don't text me or write me and tell me that I'm a horrible person. I'm just advising something. You don't have to do it. Just because the man on the video told you to do it doesn't mean you have to do it. Okay. But what I'm saying is simply this. I would have watched this film when I was 7 or 8 years old, okay? And I would have been perfectly fine watching it at that time. Okay, yeah, maybe I had some nightmares, but that's part of growing up because horror is also part of life because it talks about something that doesn't usually get talked about in life, which is fear. And fear is a real thing, and fear can constrict you from doing things. And really, what horror is about is learning to overcome fear. Because at the end of the day, horror is not about succumbing to fear; it's about overcoming fear. So that's what it is. You have to be exposed to fear in order to overcome it. And where's a more safer place, here or making a child run across a freeway? Probably watching Invasion of the Body Snatchers, right? There's a lot less that can happen other than maybe a nightmare or two. So this is one of the few ones that I will recommend that children roughly in the age 10 group, because I would have watched it younger, but I was certainly much more advanced in watching all kinds of film at that point than probably the average child is now. Although I don't know what they watch on these on YouTube and stuff like that. I'm sure it's pretty bad, but that's fine. That's a different topic for a different time. But please, please, this is a kind of a family film, but it's kind of a Halloween family film, if that makes sense. So I'm going to leave it at that, and please do watch it. And again, this is the 1978 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and until then, Alvita's in.